Commissioner Cherry?
Here.
Commissioner Cherry, are you on the call?
Here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Commissioner Brizenden?
You know, Commissioner Brizenden is not in the call yet. Oh, wait, yes, she is. Oh, I see her.
Are you here, Commissioner Brizenden?
She's talking. Maybe she's muted.
Commissioner French?
I'm here.
Commissioner Bell?
I'm here.
County Manager Mendiola?
Here.
Sheriff is absent, but is Under Sheriff Malone on the call?
Yes, Sean and I are both here.
Okay. Commissioner Brizenden, are you here? He's having trouble talking. Dr. Stringham?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, we'll go on for now. Hopefully you'll be able to figure your mute on your microphone out. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We'll go to public comment. And if you are in the public and you would like to comment, please unmute your mic, and that is *6. And then when you identify yourself, when you're finished, hit *6 again to mute yourself. Any public comment this morning? Mr. Mendiola, do you see anybody trying to get on the meeting?
One moment here. Let me check. I do not.
Okay. Hearing no public comment, we'll move right into the report with Dr. Stringham.
Good morning, everyone. The discussion that I'd like to have this morning is one that I'm very excited by, and we're really starting to get to know this virus much better. We're starting to see its infectivity curve and its characteristics and how it's spread and how it's not and how prevalent it is and lots of other things that I find fascinating. And I think they give us a real glimpse into what we're fighting and a little bit more about the information, where this is dangerous. And my favorite lesson in all of this is the fact that we're starting to get information to use in order to counter the counterculture that seems to be fighting us, the people who are not engaged and those people who've come to the wrong conclusions. So I want to be able to present some data this morning and hopefully change some minds about this and kind of let everybody know what we're actually up against. So very, very good data. So first thing I'd like to point out is that the number of cases in Humboldt County continues to drop. So for the third straight week, we've watched as the total number of new cases that we've added has gone down every single week. And the total number that have been added during the last 7 days is 6, and that's by far the lowest that we've seen in 3 weeks at this point. So I'm very pleased to see this. And the next is that we had a very big day on May 9th. May 9th was the first day that we had opened the so-called non-essential businesses. And I think everybody on the board is with me in the fact that no business in Winnemucca is unnecessary, is non-essential. All of our businesses are essential. So on May 9th, all of the non-essential businesses that were allowed to open, according to state doctrine, were opened, and we're now on day 13 past that, and the data that we're seeing is very encouraging. So the news is fantastic, I think. This is wonderful, but no new cases of this virus have been traceable back to a so-called non-essential business. When we opened businesses in Humboldt County, there were no additional cases that were added. And in fact, during that exact same period of time, we've seen a dramatic drop in the number of new cases in Humboldt County. I'd like to interpret what I think that means, because I think our business owners, our citizens, everybody in Humboldt County is owed a great big debt of gratitude. I think the bottom line is that the rules that we're following and the various things we're doing, the fact that everybody's doing the right things is having a dramatic effect. And the reason I say that is because we've been able to have fewer infections with more businesses open than we had when fewer businesses were open. So I think everybody who has a business, everybody who's involved in business, and everybody who's patronizing these businesses, it's time to stop and say thank you to each and every one of you. This is a really big deal. The next is that our community-based testing data is starting to come in, and I'm very pleased about this too. I want to tell you what the data is, but then I want to interpret it and kind of walk with you through the data so that you can come to the same conclusions that I've come to in interpreting this data to determine what this means, which is more important than the numbers themselves. So we have tested in Humboldt County so far 721 people. And of those people, we have one positive test. It's absolutely amazing. I'm really, really pleased with this data. This data, by the way, is consistent with other counties. And the other county that I'm familiar with is Churchill County. And there were 170 cases that we know of so far in Churchill. We suspect there'll be more than that. But of those 170 cases, only one positive case in Churchill County too. So of our 721, one positive, Churchill County, 170 cases and one positive. So the data is very interesting. The first and obvious conclusion that we come to is that there don't seem to be as many coronavirus cases as we had initially thought. But I want to walk you through that because the data can be a little bit misleading, and I'd like to eventually end these comments with a proposal for new data. So the first is that this is not a very common virus in our community. We have 77 known cases so far that we're following, 77 people in Humboldt County who've been infected by this virus, who've demonstrated positive tests. But the fact that we have such a low total number of community-based testing indicates that there are not as many people out there who are non-symptomatic but are infected as we thought there were. The reason this is so important is because there's an entire fight against this virus that we're not acknowledging as much as the fight against the virus itself. So ostensibly there's the fight against the virus, but then the bigger fight is a fight against a group of people who really don't believe this virus is dangerous. They don't believe that the responses that our community and communities all across the nation have instituted, that those responses are necessary. And it's very common for people to say that this virus just needs to run its course and that there really isn't anything that we need to be doing, that all of the actions that Humboldt County and other communities are taking is unnecessary. And the critical issue is that for the very first time, this data is indicating that those counterculture arguments are absolutely incorrect, that a lot of the people who don't think we're doing the right things and that our responses are out of control and much worse than the virus itself, that this data shows that those people are wrong and that the things that we're doing are absolutely being done the right way. Because implicit in all of this is the question as to why this virus is so uncommon, why so few people seem to have this. And first, I can tell you that we've suspected, even before the data came in, that this would be the case. The fact that we haven't seen as many what are called pop-up cases as we might have seen has kind of portended that. And even before this data showed, we'd suspected that would be the case. If there were a lot of people running around in our community who all had this virus, who didn't have symptoms, you'd be seeing cases seeming to pop up, because people wouldn't necessarily know who'd infected them. But in fact, we're not seeing that. And in almost every case, almost every one of the 77 cases that we've had so far, there's been a clear link between that person who became infected and another person who was known to be infected. Now we're starting to see this data that indicates very few people have this infection in our community. And in fact, if you run the numbers, the total number of people in our community who we think have been infected with this virus so far is less than 0.5%. So it's less than 1 out of every 200 people in our community. That's a very, very low number. So the battle cry of the people who think that our responses are out of proportion seems to be just let this virus run its course. But the bottom line is that the data that we're seeing shows exactly the opposite is true. All of the things that we've been doing, those are the reasons why this virus is not as common in our community as it could have been. But next, I want to talk about the limitations of the data that we have. So first, what we see are antigen tests. So this test, the test that we've done at the community-based testing program, is an antigen test. We're testing for the virus and viral particles themselves. So the one thing we'd like to know is the number of people who've actually had this virus, because so far, 1 out of 721, that just shows the number of people who are currently infected with the virus. It doesn't show what might be more useful for us to know, and that is the total number of people who've actually had this virus so far. Not those people who have it now, but the people who've had it in total. I propose that over the next couple of weeks, this board look into the possibility of doing community-based antibody testing. And I want to explain a little bit about what that would look like, how it would be different from the antigen testing, and how the data that we would collect would be far more valuable than what we have so far. So first, the fact that it's been relatively easy for patients to comply with the testing requirements of the community-based testing program makes it easier for people to actually do the things that they've needed to do. With antibody testing, on the other hand, it would let us know the total number of people who've been infected, not currently infected, but who've ever had this virus during the entire process. But that test is a blood test. So number one, it's more expensive to run. Number two, up until recently, the test results have not been as reliable, but that data is much better at this point. And number three, it'll be far better for us to be able to get this information. We're going to need to set a program up ourselves, though. So the state at this point, to the best of our knowledge, has no plan to do community-based antibody testing. My proposal would be that Humboldt County choose randomly approximately 50 to 100 people in the community who would truly be random. They can't choose themselves. We would have to choose people on a random basis and invite them to have a blood test done. That blood test would let us know what the antibody status was. We could extrapolate that data forward into the community, and we could know what we truly want to know, and that is how many people in our community have actually had this virus so far. So the data we see now tells us the total number of people who are infected right now. But if a person was infected 3 weeks ago and is now testing positive, the community-based testing we've done so far would not actually pick those people up. So my proposal for the antibody testing, we can discuss if the board decides that it would like to do this. I can get some more data, prices, and roll out a specific plan during next week's meeting. So, the big picture item here, folks, is that everybody in our community, we've all heard of people who are not doing the right things, very vocal about that on social media and various other things. But the bottom line is most people in our county are absolutely doing the right things. Most people are part of the solution, and the data that we see here really helps to drive that home. Next, I'd like to focus on kind of a current snapshot of where we are right now in Humboldt County. Last week, when I addressed the board, that we had 71 cases. We're now at 77. So that's a total of 6 additional cases in 7 days. That's less than 1 case added per day, which is lower than the total number that we've had throughout this entire process. The other thing that I'm very pleased about is when we spoke last week, the number had been 58 cases and had gone to 71. That was 13 additional cases. This week we've added 6, and the week before that we had added 18. So when you compare our data this week, the data over the last 3 weeks, it's gone down significantly every week from around 3 new cases a day to around 2 new cases a day to 1 new case, in fact, less than 1 new case per day. Right now, Humboldt General Hospital has 0 cases. That's the second week in a row that that's been the case. No cases of COVID at Humboldt General Hospital currently. And total number coming in through the walk-in clinic is lower than it had been. Total number at St. Mary's or other institutions in Reno currently is 1, but that person likely will be discharged today and not currently intubated. Unfortunately, the number of deaths we've had has risen by 1, and this was an interesting situation. The person who passed away was originally attributed to being a resident of Washoe County, but this woman was actually a resident of Humboldt County. So I'm sad that we have an additional death, but the good news is that there are fewer cases, and in context, I'm very pleased about the way things are going in general. I'm very saddened, though, that we've lost another member of the community. That total number stands currently at 4. One other thing I'd like to discuss, kind of a housekeeping issue in terms of the fact that this is a dynamic process. In the early days of the virus, we were releasing people from respiratory isolation based on the total number of days they'd been in respiratory quarantine. The reason we did that was because total number of tests we had was low, and we didn't want to use tests in order to test people who were likely going to be negative anyway. So we went to a time-based release system. And then subsequently, over the last few weeks, we've been using a testing-based quarantine release system where people are tested. And in fact, now we're testing people twice, 2 consecutive tests 24 hours apart to release from respiratory isolation. There's some talk that we likely will be going back to a non-testing based strategy. And the reason is because we're starting to learn from a study that was done in Korea, and results just came available over the last couple of days, that quite a number of people still shed viral fragments, and those fragments do not have the capacity to infect other people, but they will show a positive antigen test, nasal swab test. So what we're realizing in some cases is that we're retesting people who've been non-symptomatic, and that the tests seem to be of limited utility. So we're exploring the options of looking at non-testing based respiratory discontinuation of respiratory isolation status. And finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about a glimpse of what the end game may look like. The data that we see this week is very exciting, and I'm really pleased about what we're looking at here. I think the end game in terms of where this virus likely will stop, where we will be able to gain control and no longer have this virus be a factor in our culture. And I see that as having 2 potential end games. First, there's a lot of talk about herd immunity, and there's still a very significant percentage of people out there who believe that herd immunity will be what the end game looks like. And I'd like to explain that I no longer believe that. As near as we can figure, about 0.5% of people in Humboldt County have been exposed to this virus. We don't think there are any more. 99.5% of us have not had this virus. And in order for herd immunity to take effect, what that means is the total number of people who could get this, because such a high percentage have already been exposed, that this virus will not infect those people. They're not capable of having an infection. Herd immunity starts at about 50% of our population, 50%. Right now, less than 0.5% likely have been exposed, and we've already lost 4 people. I think that if we relied on herd immunity, we would have an exorbitant number of deaths. I do not think that's a good strategy at all. And I think that the end game, in my opinion, will have a vaccination involved. And I think if we can just hold out, continue to do the right things until the vaccination becomes available, we can be vaccinated. Those people who choose to be vaccinated can be, and they will develop a herd immunity, type of immunity based on that. And a company named Sorrento is working on an antibody called STI 1499. And this is about the most promising of what we're seeing so far. I firmly believe that a vaccination or some type of a viable treatment will likely be available at some point during the next 4 to 6 months. So very excited about the data. very excited about the potential for being a groundbreaking community by doing some antibody testing here in our community. And I'd like to let everybody know once again that the reason that these numbers are so low is because everybody is doing the right things. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Stringham. One question for you concerning the antibody testing. I had read somewhere where those tests were about $125 a piece. Is that in the ballpark?
That's about the price that I've heard also. There are a number of different vendors, and as more companies are producing the tests and the accuracies are going up, competition is going up, my anticipation is that the price will drop. And when we meet next time, I can talk a little bit about the specific prices and possibly even have some price quotes that the board could use in order to make a decision as to whether we'd like to move forward with community-based antibody testing.
The other question I had would be, we did a random testing, antibody testing of 50 to 100 people. If we knew the cost of those tests, would people that wanted to be tested for the antibody, could they do that if they were to pay for it?
I'm not sure. I'll have to be able to look into that and determine whether what direction we'd head on that.
Okay, thank you. Do any of you have any questions? I'll just start and go through the people on the board. First of all, Under Sheriff Malone, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Okay, Commissioner Cherry.
Well, yeah, I have one simple question, and thank you for the report. I'm glad to hear that we are finally maybe plateauing. I hope things are getting better. The one question I had is, do the scientists, has more studies been done to see whether the hotter weather that we have coming here will also aid in reducing the number of cases and reduce the number of infections? Is that still a belief in the scientific community?
Yes, absolutely. I think most of us think that's the case. And as I was preparing the data for this morning's discussion, I was actually wondering if we might be seeing a little bit of that. It's difficult to factor out the other variables and to be able to determine whether this is weather related, and also if so, how much of a role the weather is playing. So it'll be interesting over the next couple of weeks. My suspicion is we'll start to see a little bit of that. I think most of it, as I see it, is behavioral, and at least that's what I'd like to believe. I think people are doing the right things, and but I do suspect that weather is giving us a tailwind on this and assistance.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bell.
Yeah, just was curious on the. I hear a lot about the second wave coming and all of that. How much do we? How long do we keep doing what we're doing? And what do you think about that second wave of this thing coming back? Is that a reality, or is that maybe less likely with the numbers that we have?
Well, I think it's more likely that we will get a second wave. And I think that there will be a lot of different players in that second wave. It's my belief that apathy will likely be the largest constituent in producing that second wave. Certainly weather systems and various movements of people, various other things likely will play a role also. But I think that my suspicion is that if there is a second wave, and I guess that there is likely that there will be, that second wave will likely happen as people let their guards down, as the virus seems to be less of a factor, and as people try to resume a kind of a normal life, maybe throw caution to the wind. And I would encourage people not to do that. I think that as we learn more about this virus, we can make sure that all of our attention is being focused in the right areas so that we can minimize that second wave as best we can. For example, the CDC has suspected since the very beginning that fomite transfer or transfer of the virus based on surfaces and things of that nature has been less significant than respiratory infection. That direct breath spread from one person to another, viral particles in breath, is more important. And they're indicating this week that they really do believe that some of the most recent data is showing that. So I think the second wave will likely be compatible based on doing the right things and making sure that if there are things that are not as important, that we focus more on the things that are important to limit the amount of burnout, but yet keep our focus in areas that are most likely to cause problems.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bell. Commissioner French?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is a funding related question, and I'm wondering about this proposal in front of us right now for antibody community-based testing. And I'm wondering if we conduct those tests through HGH, are the costs recoverable through federal reimbursement? Many of the costs that are being incurred right now are directly reimbursable through both the bills that came through the feds. I'm just wondering if this would be one of them.
Good question.
No, I have to be honest and say that I'm not sure. I'm not familiar enough with the doctrine to be able to know whether it would be applicable. But when I talk to the board next week, assuming that we're interested in moving forward with something like this, and when I talk about some of the specifics, I can certainly be prepared to talk about that, and also some of the cost savings that we could do, either with bundling a larger number of tests or various other ways that we may be able to get this funded. So I can address that a little bit more next week.
Great, thank you. That was my only question.
Okay, who have I missed here? Mr. Mendiola, do you have any questions?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to save mine until we get to a later agenda item.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Brizendine, are you on? Do you have questions?
I do not believe she's on, Chair.
I don't either. She didn't answer my text, so. Okay, we'll go to Captain Wilkin. A report from you.
Good morning, Commissioner and Board. For emergency management, up to this current date, all of our resource requests through state DEM have been filled. The community-based testing event was a success, and it worked really well. The groups that came up that partnered with us on this, with Nevada Public Health and the Nevada Army National Guard and Air Guard, and they were used because they have the largest medical contingent with the largest license in the state of Nevada to come up and do this. Really worked out well. They were a great partner to work with. Everything went very smoothly. We had great cooperation from the state lab in obtaining tests and getting test results back in a timely manner. Marshall Foreman and I are making some plans for notifying people and going through the list of these tests, returning phone calls and things here. So that should be starting Friday. So we'll be getting more information to the public to go. With the mobile hospital, as we've gotten a better idea of what the actual response to the COVID situation looks like, we are beginning the deconstruction of the mobile hospital, of the offsite hospital down at the event center. We're going to pull those resources back. And fortunately for our community, we didn't end up needing that hospital. And I think that that's a good thing. I really think it speaks to what HGH and Dr. Stringham have accomplished, and people in our community working together as good partners to be able to keep people safe. So I am happy to say that we're able to start pulling those resources back because we didn't need it here. And I think that that's a good sign for our community as a whole as well. Moving forward, some of this is going to start going into the recovery phase, which is what Commissioner Bell was talking to Dr. Stringham about as far as HGH's recovery. Speaking with Lyon County and the Quad County areas, a lot of them are kind of in the same position that we are in here in Humboldt County, where we have an idea of how to respond and what resources we need. So those extras that are out there, we can start pulling those back and putting those things back into place. I've spoken with Battle Mountains Left as well as Elko County Emergency Management. They are going to follow our model here in Humboldt County to do community-based testing in their communities. So we did set the example for those other two communities along the I-80 corridor. So that's going to give us a better picture of what our neighbor communities are experiencing through their community-based testing as well. So things moving forward, we're assisting them with some of the resource requests and paperwork stuff so they have a better planning and idea on theirs. So other than that, things from emergency management have been stable. The state is reducing the quantity of meetings that we're having, so we're down to 3 times a week on our state meetings right now. Those are Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We are still participating in all of those state meetings. We also have a representative from HGH who is in those meetings as well now. So we're represented from both the county and the hospital perspective on those. So, Zim, do you have any questions for me on anything?
Yes, Captain Wilkin, if we dismantle the hospital at the event center and we have another spike, big spike that we don't expect, and we have events going on at the convention center, event center, where would the hospital be set up at that time?
That would be, I need to work with Jordan Kohler on that one. What we've seen with the mobile hospitals throughout the country, Commissioner, is that they haven't ended up being used for the most part. So a lot of these have ended up being set up just like we did, the exact same kind of preparations and materials, and they've ended up being taken back down. Mostly what we've seen, a lot of these cases are being transferred to Reno. And initially, when we put it up, it was because of that unknown, and because of the unknown with the virus and the quantity of patients and the rate of infection of what we thought we were going to potentially see here in our community. And we haven't gotten into one of those overwhelming phases yet. Nationwide, and speaking with the other communities in Nevada, most of these off-site major type resources that were put together haven't ended up being necessary. I do look at the bed system for the hospitals on about a every other day basis to see where they're at. And I don't believe that we're in a position that would be overwhelmed. If that goes back up, we can look at a couple of other offsite options that we have here in our community to set that back up again with the tents and equipment that HGH has, especially with getting into warmer weather now. It'd be really easy to set one of those up across the street if we had to provide security for. So there are good options for it. Getting into better weather provides better options as well.
Thank you, Captain. Any other questions of Captain Wilkin?
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner French.
Go ahead.
If I could I ask Captain Wilkin a question having to do with his knowledge on Elko County as well? I know you mentioned Lyon County and Lander County. I'm wondering what Elko County's response to this has been now, and whether or not they are completing community-based testing as well.
So I spoke with Chris McCann from Elko County Emergency Management, and that would have been, I believe, Thursday of last week. And that's when I started sending him over his documentation. So they're still in the early phases of community-based testing. They're trying to determine a site. Unfortunately, they don't have quite as good of a situation as we had with our event center here to do the indoor drive-through like we did. So they're in the site selection and resource procurement phase of their community-based testing. Their goals are for slightly higher numbers, but it is continuing along the lines of population percentages like we did. Quad County's tested 1,381 people in the Quad County tests, and here we were, I believe 721 was our final number for people that we tested. And population percentages, it's pretty consistent of people that want to come out and voluntarily participate. Elko will hopefully see theirs here within the next 2 weeks. It takes about a week worth of resource procurement and planning to put one of these together. It is a lot of resources to request from the state, and the state lab has to build a test specifically for the community-based testing event. So hopefully within the next 14 days, and it'll be a similar percentage and model to what we did here.
Great, thank you, appreciate it.
Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner French. Commissioner Chair, do you have any questions?
I do. I don't know if this is the proper time to ask, but there are, with summer coming, there's a lot of events scheduled at the outdoor event center, and there's weddings, all those things that people tend to schedule for, the summertime. Does anybody have a feel as to when we might go into the next phase, or when we have people out there as well, like Superior coming, that are wondering whether or not they should cancel or hold on a little bit longer? I know the governor has a great deal to say about this, but does anybody, Ken or Captain Wilkin, anyone have a feel of when that next phase and where we're going.
Yes, we're looking at the next phase, probably not until after the end of the month. But I know working with JJ, and I worked with County Manager Mendiola and Kim Peterson. And the first event we were looking at was Silver State, that they were really wanting to know where to go with it. And using Dave's model that he put together for the business community, Kim worked that over and made one for outdoor events, and it did a really good job with it. Marilyn Kirkpatrick and JJ Gogachu were very impressed with it. They were going to push that towards the governor, and it sounds pretty promising, but we really won't know anything for a few more days.
Okay, but we're not telling anybody to cancel yet, like July events or.
We haven't.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Bell?
I don't have any other questions at this time.
Okay. I suppose if you have any questions, Kevin, you've already asked them since you're in the room with you. Did I miss anybody that has a question for Captain? No, well, thank you, Captain Wilkin.
Thank you.
And we'll move to Nicole Maher. Would you give us an update report on what you've been working on?
You bet. Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So as you have already heard this morning, we're seeing some optimism, and we want people to share in that optimism, especially after the community-based testing, but want to continue to emphasize just our core practices that are going to keep our residents safe and help them understand that those things, as Dr. Stringham has said, are the true reasons why we are not seeing higher numbers, and grateful for that. As we look at the community-based testing, Marcia Foreman, our community health nurse, and I talked a little bit about some of the things, and as I'm sure you're aware today, she and Susie Esquivel will be doing community-based testing for the communities north of Winnemucca. And that will be happening from 10 to 4 at the Orovada Community Center. And even though that is designated primarily for all people outside of Winnemucca, if Winnemucca residents missed the one this past week, they are welcome to go there. We also have one scheduled for Pershing County Grass Valley from 10 to 4 on June 1st, as well as Pershing County itself. There will be one in Lovelock from 10 to 4 on May 29th and 30th. And so I'm glad that our partners are participating in that as well. I wanted to mention a couple of things as those other testings are going on. I believe that very pleased with the 721, but perhaps some of our numbers were a bit down because of a few things. One was just the things we discussed that I discussed with you last week. People maybe just misconceptions about this was a government tracking device, that their results any negative results would shine poorly on them in future job opportunities or health insurance opportunities, things like that. So dealing with those kinds of misconceptions. The second one is just a very practical one. It scared people. They did not want to undergo what they had been told or had kind of spread around the community was a painful test. I was tested, and it certainly was not my favorite thing, but I could endure 10 or 15 seconds of discomfort, and the National Guard was just amazing. And I can just say from personal experience, I thought it was just great. So certainly there was that, just some fear, and I think as people think about just being able to do that for our community and give us that data, it's very important. And also just the personal surety to know that you don't have the virus. And then the third one we just wanted to address briefly is that there were some businesses and some industries in Humboldt County who told their employees that if they came, they would have to self-quarantine until the results came back. And that really stymied me. An asymptomatic person who is tested is no different from a coworker who's not tested. These people had no symptoms. There would be no reason for them to self-quarantine. If the result came back positive, then of course they would go into quarantine and go through, begin the tracing process and those kinds of things. So just want to make sure as these continue in our side communities and in Pershing County, Grass Valley, and today in Arvada, that people understand that there's no need to quarantine. If a person is ill and is showing symptoms, they need to go to Humboldt General Hospital Screening Clinic and be tested there. So a couple of great things about the community-based testing. Marcia and Susie Esquivel let me know yesterday that about 30% of our testers were Hispanic, about 70% were non-Hispanic, and we are hopeful that today we, in working with our tribal leadership up in McDermott, we are hopeful that we can also capture some Native American. We want a really broad spectrum of testing. Marcia said that the state is hoping for 10% of each county population to be tested, and for us, that would be somewhere around 1,600 people. And yet we noted that between the 721, what we get today, and also the testing that has happened at Humboldt General Hospital through the screening clinic, which is nearing 600, we're getting close to seeing that kind of testing in our community and to meeting that target goal. Just really grateful to Captain Wilkin and Lily Avalos from the Frontier Community Action Agency and others who went door to door and helped spread the word about this and to get people there. And so very grateful for those results. From just listening on our social media channels, our community feels like that's positive progress, that we're reducing the spread of COVID-19 and grateful for that. There are others who saw that as a waste of time and resources, but I think Dr. Stringham made an excellent argument a few minutes ago for the reason for that data, and that data didn't just, pardon me, that data is certainly based on behavioral considerations from our residents, and grateful for people trying to do the right thing. I wanted to show you just real quickly, if I can screen share here. Can you see that? This is a poster that don't see anything. Okay, let me try one more time. How about that?
No.
No.
We had it, Nicole, and then it disappeared. There you're back. Now you're back.
Okay, perfect. This is just a simple little poster. Let's see, I think Pauline Sala shared this with Dave, and so I just redesigned it, essentially took the same information and made it for Humboldt County. But this is our next little mini push with our businesses. We're working with the Chamber of Commerce, and we've had these posters printed up and have a nice letter from Dave that's going to go out to our storefront business owners, and they will be asked to join our COVID compliant force. And as you'll see from the poster, if they agree to be COVID compliant, they're going to agree to require their employees to wear face coverings at all times. They're going to require 6 feet of physical distancing for employees and customers, and also require their employees to engage in frequent hand washing. And certainly businesses can strongly recommend that customers also wear face coverings and participate in these other preventative measures. And so these posters with the letter, as I said, will be sent out to our storefront businesses, and then we'll also just be spreading the word through some press and different things that businesses can actually pick up one of these posters or get one of the posters to them and want it a prominent place in their business so that they can participate in this. Just a couple of last things. We're still dealing with some misinformation out there, and Dr. Stringham's just on it all the time, sharing good information, but still misinformation that only people with symptoms should be wearing masks. That is not true. But the most important thing we want to continue to emphasize is that the most important thing they can do is socially distance. That is number one. Masks are important, but they are secondary to that. And together, we want both of those things to happen together. Then there is great protection in that. And of course, washing our hands frequently. We are concerned about graduation, are concerned about Father's Day coming up, and want people to continue to understand that they can only gather with people in their own household. And if there is a need, such as a workplace environment, that they need to maintain that social distance and wear a mask. Wearing a mask does not allow you to be in close proximity to others. That's all I have. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Nicole. Any of the board members have a question of Nicole? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item. What is that, Dave? I don't have an agenda in front of me.
Yes, so the next item is data regarding COVID-19 spread in Humboldt County, informational only. My opinion is that we've really covered that with the doctor's report on both the community-based as well as the hospital-based testing. Again, that would be the next one.
Do you have anything else to add to that, Dr. Stringham, that you haven't gone over already with us?
No, I sure don't. I'd be happy to answer questions, but no, I don't.
All right. The next item, Dave.
Mr. Chair, yeah, the next item, again, same thing can be said. It's status update on community-based testing in Humboldt County. Dr. Stringham has this way of just, kind of taking everybody's thunder away, and he did a really good job of that earlier. So, but yeah, that's what that would be. And I think, again, he gave such a great overview of the community-based testing. But again, there may be some follow-up questions because we did have some people that joined in after, or at least partway through his discussion.
Okay. And what's the next item?
Next item is follow-up review and discussion regarding phase 1 of the opening of the economy. And that's a follow-up review, discussion, and possible action regarding the opening of non-essential businesses, which began on May 9th, based on Governor Sisolak announcement of phase 1 of the road to recovery, to include but not limited to necessary restrictions that may be necessary to ensure the success of the reopening, and including but not limited to any legal options within NRS 441A and duties the health board may take to protect health and safety of the citizens of Humboldt County. Consideration of an amended form to present to patients that are asked to self-isolate, outlining the legal ramifications of not following the guidelines for self-isolation. And I guess what I would just say on this, Mr. Chair, is this is just a continuation. And I think, again, Dr. Stringham did a very nice capturing the idea that since the May 9th opening, things have been very successful. At least from my perspective, I have had a deluge of calls from local businesses asking what they can do to prepare, if they've done enough, those types of things, which I've been really impressed with. And again, so far so good based on the numbers. I did have a question, Commissioner Cherry, was the question that I was going to ask similar, but I want to add on to that a little bit, which was about the outdoor events. As you mentioned, Superior, the Superior Rodeo is a big one and brings in a lot of money into the community. Tim, as you said, Kim's put together, along with Superior, with a great plan for these events, not only outdoor, but in the indoor event center as well. And again, I think with the kind of space that we have, especially in those venues, it does make it a lot easier, specifically with the primary goal, which is distancing. And that's a hard thing to do, but anyway, so there's a good plan. I also want to mention too that there's a very large stock car race that is scheduled for the end of the month. The Winnemucca Regional Raceway, and this one is being anticipated not only here locally and regionally, but also by neighboring states, just due to the fact that everybody's been shut down in that industry. Elko had theirs last week, and did a really good job from everybody I've talked to about making sure that distancing requirements were in place and people were safe. It was very successful. So those are the kind of things I know that you've talked with JJ and Commissioner Kirkpatrick in Clark County, as well as Agnew, who are on the LEAP team with the governor. And so it's my hope that there's going to be some good news from the governor, that he's going to give this an opportunity to bear itself out. I think our numbers speak well, and I think the same can be said around the state.
Thank you, David. I just got a text that I wanted to add on to something we talked about earlier. Kim Peterson and Kent Maher just got off a phone conversation with JJ Gogachia, and they said the indication right now is that the governor probably will issue something on Monday or Tuesday of next week concerning relaxing restriction on livestock events. So I think what Dave was talking about there, he said Superior, but we were talking about Silver State.
Or Silver
State. The Superior can be handled. I mean, there's always Superior will have that sale, whether they do it with the big steak feed or not, but that's something we'll still have to look at.
Thanks for correcting me. Yep, Silver State.
Do we have any other questions concerning the businesses community that has already opened? I know I've had calls from some of the businesses that aren't allowed to open yet, and I had a good visit with Terry Boyle from the Winnemucca Inn and how that's going to work possibly with the casinos, and I think there'll be a statement out on that soon too. Also estheticians and massage therapists and tattoo parlors, and they're looking at all of those and how they will proceed, and some of those will be the last ones, and of course with bars as well. But any other questions? Are we to public comment? Or new agenda items, I guess, huh?
Correct, yes.
Well, I definitely think we want to have on there about the antibody testing, something that we can talk about and maybe take action on. And Dr. Stringham can provide us more information cost-wise and whether people can actually pay for a test if they want it outside of that random sampling.
I will add that.
Does anybody else have anything they'd like to see on this agenda other than what we normally have? None? Any other questions of any of the panel today from anybody on the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is
Yeah.
Commissioner French.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I had just a follow-up question I wanted to ask having to do with an inquiry that we had last week having to do with the cloth masks coming from the state stockpile. I remember I asked that question as to what the disposition of that was. Now that we are moving forward with a new push for face masks in all of our businesses, as well as compliance on the part of customers in those businesses, I'm seeing where we might have a bottleneck with regard to that if we don't have a ready source of those cloth masks made available. Not just wondering what the status of that is.
Mr. Chair, Dave Mendiola. So I can speak to the fact that we do have 3,000 masks on order. We do expect them next week. And those were primarily geared towards the reopening for businesses. And I do have a number of orders. Obviously, the mask makers continue to roll along too. So those two, I would defer to Captain Wilken. I know that he had put in some orders, as he mentioned earlier. He's gotten full stock of that. But I believe, and this is the question to Captain Wilken, is that anything we get through the state, I believe, has to be used for first responders, medical personnel, that type of thing, and or county personnel, city personnel, and not the general public. I wonder if he could just clarify that for me.
Yes, I can, and you're correct on that. So the SMS and the resource request we submit into Nevada Emergency Management, there is a hierarchy of needs based on who they are provided to. So medical and medical providers are the highest tier in that hierarchy of needs. Following that is going to be your first responders and public agencies. And following that is going to be your general government. The intent of the things that we obtain through these resources are for facilitating those needs specifically. So we're not able to obtain them and distribute them through the state. They are getting more strict on some things. So the N95 and KN95 masks, to continue receiving those in large shipments, we do have to sign up for the Patel system and send those back in for sterilization so they can be redistributed later if we end up needing more of them. So they are controlled items. I am also required to track all of this data through FEMA or for FEMA as to the use of these items, how many we received, what were distributed, and what we did with them. So to stay within those guidelines, we do need to follow the parameters that are set up. So we're not able to just distribute those out to the community at random. I did receive an email from Megan Whitworth this morning regarding the cloth masks and whether or not we wanted those as a county. I did tell her for now that we do want those as a county if they're going to distribute those to us. And I spoke with Caleb Cage regarding the community distribution of the cloth masks, and I'm not sure what the outcome of that meeting that they had was.
So basically then the answer to the question is that from a community perspective, the only source of cloth masks that we're going to have for businesses and for people outside of government entities and EMS and medical personnel is going to be the Winnemucca mask makers. Is that my understanding then?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
to Mr. or Commissioner French, no. So the 3,000 that we're getting, those will go directly to the community. And like I say, I expect those to be in next week.
Okay, thank you. So the orders for those masks that are coming in right now will be coordinated through your office then, Dave?
Right. We're going to come up with a distribution plan. I haven't spoken to Dr. Stringham about that yet, but we need to discuss that. So yeah, those will come, and those are ones that we ordered directly through an approval that we got from the county commissioners about a week or so ago. So we've, like I say, those are coming directly. Those are costs that will be put under COVID-19 expense line, and we'll look to get reimbursement for those.
Dave, did we make that order through the state stockpile, or is that through a private entity?
Private entity. It was not through the state.
Okay, thank you.
Mr.
Any
Chair,
other? Yes, go ahead.
this is Commissioner Cherry. This is probably for Dr. Stringham. There have been, I think you reported 571 tests have been taken at HGS so far. We had the rapid test kit and equipment come in. Does that also, is the 571 those that have been sent off to the state lab, or does it include both the rapid testing and the state lab tests?
The number is 721, and that includes the non-rapid tests that were sent off directly to the state. So that's just for the community-based testing program, or the PODS system that was set up through the Sheriff's Office, Sean Wilkin, and also through Marcia. And so the rapid tests are officiated only through Humboldt General Hospital, and specifically just through the emergency department. And so the only entity in the community that would do rapid-based testing, or rapid testing, the Abbott test, is the emergency room. And so those are different from the community-based testing program in that the rapid tests are used typically for patients who either have symptoms or who have a known exposure, whereas the community-based program is completely non-symptomatic patients and people who have not had known exposures.
Yeah, I get that, but so that includes all tests that HGH has done, not the community testing, but the other tests that the hospital has done, outside the community testing.
Oh, I apologize. I think I misunderstood your question. I don't remember the total number of, I know that Nicole likely would have indicated the total number of tests that were done at the hospital. And I don't know that number. Was that 571?
Thought it was 571. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought she mentioned we're nearing 600 hospital-based tests, which would be a combination
Be a
of
combination.
the quick
Okay.
tests and the regular, and then plus the 721. So we're a little over, right at 1,300, a little over maybe.
Okay.
I apologize. I think I misunderstood your question.
No
So
problem.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? I think we're ready for public comment. Do we have any public comment? If someone in the public would like to comment or ask a question, now's the time. Press *6 to unmute your mic. Identify yourself for the public record. Not hearing any public comment, we will adjourn this meeting at 10:04 a.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.